Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today, I will be welcoming a sex therapist, a lady who is doing God's work. I admire her greatly. Her name is Dr. Linda Mona. I had heard her on a podcast called, I believe it was called The Sex Ed. And she was talking about how she's an advocate for the disabled and she helps them with their sex lives. And so I'm having her on the show today to talk about her advocacy, how she became Dr. Linda, and I believe she has a disability herself. We're going to get into that as well. And I think it'll make for an interesting show today because, this month is International Masturbation Month. And doing all these sex episodes, been having some pretty interesting ones, but I think this one will be pretty interesting because you get to hear it from a disabled person's point of view. And being disabled myself, this is just a rare once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that I'm very grateful for. So, here is my interview with Dr. Linda Mona. Hey, Dr. Linda.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am okay. I'm trying to get my this earpiece in for my landline so that I can hear you well. I'm doing okay. How are you coping with all this madness?
Oh, take it day by day. I've recently caught a cold. I'm going to the doctor in a little while to find out how severe it is.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Are you running a fever? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, you poor thing.
Yeah, but I can handle it, though.
Yeah. Do you want to postpone this? Do you want to do it another time?
Not at all. I'm ready to go.
Okay. Your call. I mean, I'm flexible. I'm working from home.
Yeah.
So whatever. I'm sorry you're not feeling well. And it's hard. Like all these symptoms come on and my kids have allergies and it's like every time something happens upper respiratory related, we think it's something bad.
Yeah. I've taken Tylenol and it's breaking me into a sweat. So I feel really good right now.
Okay. All righty.
Well, welcome to the show. It's such a great honor. Thank you for taking the time today.
Sure. I'm happy to help you.
Yes. So, going back in time a little, were you born with a disability?
So, no, I was not. I acquired an autoimmune condition at the age of 6. And I'm well into middle age now.
Yeah.
I've lived with it most of my life. So I try to identify myself as not only a psychologist, but just a professional patient, because I certainly have navigated the medical system most of my life.
Mm-hmm. I don't know too much about autoimmune system. How severe is it?
I think I would say it's a significant disability, and it limits a lot of my functionality. I use a scooter wheelchair to get around, so I'm able to walk. But I do use assistance. And I also have people who help me throughout the day, whether it's at work or it is at home.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's really wonderful.
Yeah, we all get through it in one way or another, and sometimes it's easier than others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, last 5 years, I've been walking with metal in my leg following a car accident. Mm-hmm. And I walk with a cane. At first, I was walking with 2 canes, but now I just walk with 1. And I can walk short distance without it, but long distance, I need it.
Right. So that's going to change in life for you. Yeah, some people see adaptive equipment as a barrier, and some people see it as, freedom. I can remember early on when I started using a scooter earlier in my life. It was actually when I went to high school because the campus was so large. And I remember a medical professional saying to my parents, it must be so hard for you to see your daughter having to use this device. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I get to go to the mall, I get to shop all day, I get to not worry, where's the next place to sit down, right? So, right. And yet it does bring external stigma to what it means an adaptive device. So I think it's both of those feelings, but I think many of us are just kind of preoccupied with the negativity around it. But for some of us, it allows us to get along with less pain, or it allows us to do different things that we might not be able to do.
Absolutely. Were you always a sexually curious person growing up, that it was a natural progression into your current work?
Actually, let me tell you how that all started. So when I was in high school, I joined up for a teen advocate program. And that's what it's called. It was a teen advocacy program. And there were different divisions within that program. And one of the divisions was sex education and relationships. And so I wanted to work in that division, wanted to try to help people with that. And as I was going through the training to be the teen advocate, I started looking at all this information, and I thought, this isn't my experience. Who are they talking about? Who are they talking about with teenagers being, curious or acting a certain way and having questions about things? And I thought, wow, my experience as a young person with a disability was very different. And I think that, people, that non-disabled people or, guardians or parents will make these kind of subtle suggestions like, oh, do you think he's cute or she's cute? Or, oh, look at how cute their boyfriend and girlfriend. That doesn't happen from an early age.
Yeah.
Kids with disabilities. It just doesn't. That socialization is not there. So I think what ends up happening is you don't really identify that way. I don't know that I identified as a disabled girl. And I choose to use the word disabled first. I don't need to say person with a disability. I use those things interchangeably, but disability is an identity for me, and it's neutral, so I don't see that as negative. So I felt like a disabled girl, so I started to say, now when I look back on it, like, did I have a gender identity? Did I have a sexual identity? Not sure. But I know that the experiences were different, and I went to a lecture in the 80s in Los Angeles, and I heard this disabled woman talk about sexual rights for disabled people. I had never thought of it. None of this I'd never thought of any of it. And I remember, working in this teen advocacy role and helping other people and feeling very different and feeling isolated and not having many people to talk about it, to talk about those things and why my life was different. And so it wasn't a natural curiosity, that's a long-winded answer to your question. It wasn't a natural curiosity. It was that there was a difference that I recognized. And so from that point on, I thought, well, I think I feel drawn to helping people who are like me. And actually, in a high school interview, a yearbook interview, somebody had said to me, "What do you want to do when basically what are you going to do with your life, or what do you want to do as you grow up?" And I was one of these weird people who really knew. So I said, "Oh, I want to go to UCLA, and I want to study psychology, and I want to help people with disabilities." And lo and behold, I did that. And although I didn't know that I would be focusing most of my career on the sexual rights and sexual expression of people with disabilities.
Was sex talked about in your family's home?
Well, I grew up in a very liberal family, so
Yeah.
There was nothing that was really off topic. I don't know that the people around me really had the language or knew what to do with it. I think parents who have kids with disabilities are, as any parent, right, you're protective. And so it's like safety first, safety first. But I mean, I didn't, I had parents and I had a family who, encouraged me to do different things as being a teen advocate, and also, would take me to some of these larger disability presentations so that I was exposed to different things. So that's kind of, being informed by the community was something that was huge for me. And it was a time in Los Angeles disability history where there were a number of key people here who were very much into the civil rights of people with disabilities. Now, sexuality has not always been under that umbrella, but it has had its place as we have gone through history and trying to figure out what it is that our community needs. And I think it's under-addressed in some ways because it's one of the things that we feel most oppressed by. So we're not the ones when people, even women with disabilities, when we talk about, there's this history of women being sexualized, being catcalled. I mean, I think women who grew up with disabilities don't have that experience. I mean, I didn't have that experience. I know I can look from afar and say that is horrible and that shouldn't happen, and I could imagine a lifetime of being catcalled or being sexualized, but it is an unfamiliar experience for some people with different bodies. You're just socialized very differently. So I don't think there was anything off topic. I think I had to find my own path with my disability community and family, because when you grow up with disability, it is, you're unlike most people around you, unless you make a concerted effort to be around the community. Not everybody has other people with disabilities in their family or has their friends, or, it's just not kind of this natural way of being in the community. So I think as I sought that out and I realized it and I had this goal to be a psychologist, I felt like this was what I was called to do. I was called to have a voice for people who maybe didn't know how they were feeling or couldn't articulate how they were feeling about the lack of being regarded as a sexual person or having access to partners.
Yeah, that's been, my goal through my podcast and my comedy persona and stuff, is that, I want to let people know that the disabled are interested in sex as well, because I don't see any disabled performer doing that, I mean, they want to live up to everyone's perception that they are sweet, empathetic, and an inspiration. And yes, I can be all those things, but, I can also say I like tits and ass,
Yeah. Right. And somebody might say, really? Aren't you just, concerned about physical access to a building?
Yeah.
I worry about that too, but it's on a different plane. No, it really is. And I think it's an accessibility issue in a lot of ways. It's access to partners, it's access to people's attitudes. It's, talking to our medical providers and our mental health experts about, making sure they always talk to their clients and their patients about that topic. Every provider should be talking about sexuality with their patients because it's part of life and it's part of well-being and it's a buffer, right? Life sucks sometimes and, good things and bad things happen. And the things that pull us through those times are our relationships with people and pleasurable activities. And the last time I looked, sex was supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to buffer you. It keeps you connected during dark times.
Mm-hmm. Has it been difficult to be disabled and be an advocate for disabled people's sex life?
Well, I certainly feel like I've been saying the same thing for the last 25 years. And you know what? I'll continue to say it for another 25. I think that it is hard when you are somebody who has an apparent disability, right? So uses a wheelchair or looks disabled as opposed to a non-apparent or an invisible disability, for people to not always see that first. And so as a medical, as a psychologist who's worked in medical settings, right, when I show up to a team, people will ask me, may I help you? Because there's no conceptualization of me being a professional. So here am I, here's Dr. Linda Mona, and not only is this Dr. Linda Mona, who has a PhD in clinical psychology, she also has the lived experience of being disabled, and she's going to talk about a difficult topic that nobody wants to talk about. Or some people do, but they just don't know how. So you ask medical students or psychology residents, why don't you talk about it? We don't know how to do it. So there's been a lack of training. There's, when people, for example, have a spinal cord injury, many times they lose a lot of sexual functioning ability. And it's very, just as it's difficult to tell somebody you might not ever walk again, to tell somebody, you know what, you might not have an orgasm the way that you used to. And, and that's really hard, and there's a lot of grief with that, but we're going to work with you to show you how to experience your sexuality in the best way that you can. So medical providers don't know how to have that conversation. It's hard to have that conversation. Sex sits in this context of religion and morals and spirituality, and it's very personal to people. And so they might not be aware themselves of their own belief systems on it, and yet they're being asked to ask somebody else. And then what if they don't have the answer? So I try to, I think it's difficult, and it's been difficult to kind of to get past the layers of my identity for other people to look at me and listen to what I might have to say, and to then take the strategies that I can offer to them about asking a simple question to their patients or to their clients, right? Which might be, in what ways has your disability interfered with your ability to have a good sex life or to experience your sexuality? And you know what? Some people might not care. They might not care about sex. That's fine. Then that's not my problem. But if somebody is really wanting to do that and there's a barrier, I want it to be my problem. I want to help them with it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, because we live in such a world of ignorance towards the disabled that it's really frightening. And, just like the gay community or minorities or a whole lot of what women go through, it seems like, we're just not fully accepted in society.
Right. And it's a level of diversity that is not recognized all of the time. And it's different, right? We can't say that disability experience is the same as being a person of color or LGBT or a trans person. It's not exactly the same, but the oppression might be the same, and the way that the community is disenfranchised and their experiences minimized, or that we're seen as, for example, in the current pandemic, that we're expendable, right? So that, you look at some of these states who have rationing decisions on who gets a ventilator and who doesn't. And some of those are on point systems where, somebody who looks like me might not be somebody who would get a ventilator over somebody else because my body's different, or because a provider is looking at me and saying, you know what, I bet you she doesn't have that much to live for. Not as much as this other person who's 25 or 30 and is not disabled. You know what I mean? It's that level of devaluing just permeates. And I think that, it is a level, and it's the same thing with older adults, right? That we have a value of we devalue older adults, and we value the beginning of life much more. Not across all cultures, of course, but so that part is really challenging. And so I think, looking at the diversity of what it means to have a disability, and looking at our rights and our access to health care, and our rights and access to having a sex life. And that might, and we think about having sex across, like, non-disabled people's sex standards. There's lots of ways for people to have sex. It's not, heterosexual vaginal intercourse. It could be hand-holding, eye-gazing. It could be non-penetrative sex. It could be whatever somebody wants. But we're judging it against those normative standards that we need to get away from.
Mm-hmm. So what should the disabled do to have amazing sex lives?
I love that question. What should they do? Well, one thing they don't really even have to do, that they have to increase their awareness on, is that they already probably are better lovers and more creative lovers than non-disabled people. And the reason I say that is that folks who have different challenges have to think critically about everything they do in life. It might take 6 steps to get to in one direction, where non-disabled people just go and do it. So, for example, if I, drop something on the floor and I could pick something up with a grabber stick, I could have someone else do it for me. I might be able to have my dog do it. There's lots of different strategies, as is with sex. I want to get in a certain position, or I want to express myself in a certain way, but I can't do it the way I used to. or I can't do it the way I want to. So what are all the different ways? What equipment do I need? Can I use a sex toy? Do I need some Velcro to hold my hand onto a sex toy? Or how can I position myself so that I can get my arms around my partner? So that ability to critically think is already there. It just needs to be applied, I think, to sex and to whether that's sex with yourself or sex with someone else. So masturbation, sometimes people need help with that. They might need help because they need help getting a sex toy out of their drawer. They might need help getting lube out. They might need help with an adapted sex device. They might need someone to set them up. And what I mean by that is they might need someone to get them in a certain position, which can be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And most people go without asking because it would be very uncomfortable to ask that. If someone has a partner, some of these things are resolved. Or somebody has somebody that they trust to assist with that. But you can imagine that some people just aren't able to access masturbation because they're not able to use their hands or they're not able to set themselves up in a way to do it. And so what I would say in that situation is there's erotica, there's different ways to do things. And so to think about any way that you feel sexual, whether it's looking at something, listening to something, touching something of a different texture, whatever you need to do to get by and to be able to connect with that part of yourself. I think there are, there are ways to adapt products and devices to help people with stimulating themselves or stimulating others. And I think, outside of all that logistical stuff, communication is so important. And it's very hard to know exactly how to say something and when to say it. We usually think, the third date is a magical date for everything. Everything happens on a third date. But I think what that means is that there's just a deepening of trust or connection that happens as we start to date people more or connect with them more. Mm-hmm. And that might be a time to kind of trust things out. I think sometimes people get so anxious about having a date, or they haven't had one in a long time, or they might have the opportunity to have sex, and they don't want to blow it in some way. And so it might be, okay, so this is my disability, and this is what I need, and this is what I can do and what I can't do, and whoa, too much information, right? We want to test trust out. We want to see how somebody responds, because some people are open to being with someone with a disability and some people aren't. And it's not our job to try to change somebody's mind. It's our job to identify those people who have a broader lens on this issue and to then work with that person and to communicate and to realize it's not going to be perfect, and people might say things that might feel uneasy, and that as long as you can communicate about those things, there are strategies to work through. I'd also say getting, consulting with, if somebody has access to a counselor or a psychologist or some other mental health professional to help with those things. Rehabilitation psychologists are psychologists who are more trained around disability issues and might be helpful with just even planning what to say to somebody, how to say it, how to explore things further, and, really kind of navigate that process of trying to connect with somebody else.
Yeah, back in 2009, I got to have a one-night stand with a girl in a wheelchair, and she had come into the bar that I was working in, and it was great. I was very gentle with her. She was able to lay down on the bed with me, but she insisted in being in her wheelchair for the foreplay. So I got to hold on to her wheelchair bars during the blowjob she gave me, and stuff like that. It was great. I always wonder, whatever happened to her,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, maybe she felt secure, like being in her chair initially to kind of see how it was going,
Yeah.
Wheelchairs can be like a safe place to kind of navigate that. But yeah, and perhaps it's that, she identified that you were somebody who was open to being with somebody who was different.
Yeah. Oh, I have never been a snob when it comes to a woman who is different, if she's in a wheelchair or not, if she's fat or thin. I've never been that way. Mm-hmm. Is it more difficult, you think, for quadriplegics and amputees to have sex?
You know what? A great question. I don't think it's more difficult. I think it is. I think it's a different challenge. So for amputees, it is about kind of positioning. In terms of logistics, it would be positioning or balance, and how somebody can navigate their sexual expression in that way. And again, discussion of a missing body part can be difficult, and to actually show what somebody's different body looks like, right? Again, it's testing trust. So I think that, everyone's going to have their own story around it. But with amputees, I think it's about kind of, figuring out your relationship to your body and what it's like to not have a part of your body that you perhaps once had. And then logistically, it's about balance and, trial and error with sex play. Trial and error, trying to figure out exactly how best somebody can express themselves. And for people who live with spinal cord injury, it really varies, right? So it varies depending upon the level of spinal cord injury, the degree of the spinal cord injury, what limbs are affected, what isn't affected, what nerves are in place, and what isn't. And I think with spinal cord injury, the best approach is kind of a team approach. So if someone has a good medical team that has a psychologist, a medical doctor, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, it really is kind of a group approach to, once you figure out what the patient's goal is or the client's goal, to help them with that. So some people with spinal cord injury are frustrated because they feel like, they're limited in terms of sexual positions that they used to hold on to, and that they kind of have to lay in one, quote unquote, lay in one place. They're not able to thrust or be as active. And also another consideration for people with spinal cord injuries if they have a partner with a spinal cord injury. So there's often an assumption that people with disabilities only have sex with people without disabilities.
Yeah.
Right? And so
yeah.
It's hard, right? It's a whole other level of complexity. If you've got two people with limitations navigating, but people do it and people figure it out. And sometimes they do it on their own. I certainly don't want my message to be that somebody has to have a mental health professional or a physical therapist to help them, but I would like to think that we have certain resources in place where if somebody had a question or they wanted to know how they could better position themselves or what they might say to somebody, that they could do that. But I think, spinal cord injury is unique also in that it can affect somebody's sexual response cycle. And that's when we think about kind of desire, excitement, orgasm, and resolution. And sometimes people with spinal cord injury do not have a physiological orgasm the way that they used to. And there is often a push for people to say, oh, it's okay, you just kind of move everything up and say, hold on, I dropped you. I'm back. There's a push for people to move everything into their head and have what people think of as a mental orgasm. And I'm being a little sarcastic with that because on one hand, I do think that sex becomes very different when you can't feel your body the way that it used to and it doesn't function the way that it used to. But I think that when you lose an experience, it has to be grieved. And we have to acknowledge that it's there. We can't just push it under the carpet. So if you don't function the way that you used to and you're really missing that, let's talk about that. And then let's move on to see what it is we can create that isn't going to take the place of that, but it perhaps could be another way of experiencing a heightened level of sensuality. Some people with spinal cord injury will often say, I don't really know when I'm done with sex, right? Because, usually there's a beginning, middle, and end. And now I don't have a finale. I don't know what to do. And so that disconnection between somebody's mind and body and the way they used to function can be a challenge. And so some people do. They think about a sexual fantasy that they've had in the past. They just rethink their whole process around sex without a finale. They might go by their partner if they're having partner sex it really is just depends upon the person and trying out different things and to, have some self-compassion that this is not easy and that, sex is worth fighting for, and we should, all of us in the disability community should support one another with that, and we should, find resources if people need them to better explore these issues.
Yeah. Do you think that people who were born with disabilities have more trouble finding someone to have sex with than people who became disabled later in life?
I don't know that they have. I don't think that people who are born with disability or acquire disability early in life are at more of a disadvantage or have a more difficult time. And at the same time, I do think that they may have less experience.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have people who acquire disability or some kind of functional difference later in life, and they have lived a good part of their life as a non-disabled person, they're more likely to have had the early experiences of sex play or experimentation than people who haven't. Because as I said earlier, that's the early socialization of, go flirt with this one, or is that your boyfriend, is that your girlfriend? Those things don't happen, and oftentimes people are not in the same social circles as non-disabled kids or teens, so they're not, left alone that often to experiment. They might not be going to parties or into other social events the way that other teens might be doing. So I think age of onset, later age of onset means that somebody might have had more experience and they might have more to compare it to or more knowledge about sex play. But I don't know that it makes it more difficult to find partners. I think with technology increasing the way that it has, this was a very different discussion in the early 90s, right? Or even in the 80s and even before that, when we didn't have as much online dating or online connecting or virtual communities.
Yeah.
People can do things in a way now that they weren't able to. But I think it's a different life experience. There's research that says, people who have later onset of disability, are better adjusted. There's other research that says that they're less well adjusted. So, I think I think the research question is wrong. I think the question is, what is the difference, and how does that lead to better wellness in their life?
Mm-hmm. Do you encourage disabled people to consensually talk dirty with each other and do sexting on their cell phones?
If that is something that they're open to,
yeah.
A lot of people have, values around about what it means to use profanity or to do that sexting. Or I think that one of the things that happens when somebody becomes disabled and their life changes, that there's a clarification of values that happens. Mm-hmm. So it might be that in the past somebody would say, "Oh, I don't need sex toys with my sex play. I'm enough," or my partner doesn't need that. But when something happens to your body or something changes in your body, and you no longer have access to what you used to do, there might be a reconsideration of that. To say, I never used it before, but I wonder if using a feather or using something to touch my partner in a different way would make sex a little bit more exciting.
Mm-hmm. I have Asperger's syndrome, but even if I didn't, I would still have no filter because that's how my parents are.
Well, at least you know yourself.
Yeah.
That's always a good thing.
Yeah. So May is International Masturbation Month, and I've been a chronic masturbator as long as I can remember, and I've never had any trouble with it, but I'm sure there's a lot of disabled people out there who do. What would you suggest they do to make masturbation more accessible and easy for them?
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you're celebrating Masturbation Month on your series here, because I think it's historically been something that we don't talk about as much for women, and even though it's kind of more out there with boys and men, there's like a backseat that masturbation gets to partner sex. And I think it needs to be seen as an adjunct to partner sex, not a backseat. And so I think, the issue is that for people who have the physical ability and have an openness to explore their body, that they should do just that. And if they don't know what they can do, if, they can find some private time to explore themselves, I would encourage them to do that. This is the tricky part because privacy becomes an issue. Most people masturbate if they're with a partner or or by themselves. And
Right.
if you add on the complexity of people with disabilities having, personal assistants or caregivers or people in the house all the time, sometimes it's so hard to find privacy. But if somebody can think about a time when they are all alone, maybe it's the shower for a couple minutes, maybe it's laying in bed at night when they're alone, of exploring, how it is that they can see what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And it's not just touching with hands. It could be rubbing up against something. It could be rubbing against a blanket or a pillow or anything that you have around you that you can experiment with. So I think if it's in somebody's wheelhouse to do it and they're open to doing it, there are also books on masturbation, and there's lots of writing online that somebody can look to see. There's fantasies, right? That
Right.
it is erotica or fantasies that somebody wants to read. It may not be touching themselves at all if they're not able to. It might be reading a really steamy story, or it might be watching something online. People have access to erotica in a way that they never have before. And so I have, heard from a lot of people with disabilities that sometimes is the only outlet. And it may be that people on the outside say, oh, that's just too bad, right? The person can't really do what they need to do. And you know what? It might not be accessible to them, but it might be okay, and it might be the way that they're thriving. It might be looking at still pictures of things that turn somebody on. So I think it's about using that creative brain that people with disabilities have to think about what they have access to, what they're comfortable with, and to realize that much of this is experimentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've always been a guy who who liked to masturbate with a friend or a partner watching, But of course, in the last few years, that's become, considered immoral with the Me Too movement and Louis C.K. and Harvey Weinstein and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's become a really tough issue.
Yeah. And consent is important. It
Yeah.
is vital, right? And as long as two people are consenting, or somebody's consenting with their own body, there should be choice to do what they want to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Is there any kind of toys you can recommend for the women?
Well, I will say that some of the toys that I will advise people to use are hands-free devices. Right? So what I mean by that is any kind of vibrator that that somebody could actually put on and leave on and use a remote to control it. So when we think about toys or devices that require less hand mobility, if that is a barrier for somebody. So, I'm not working for any particular sex toy company or touting anything.
Yeah.
But I do know that there are toys. There's I think a butterfly. There's different things that can go around someone's thighs and be on the vulva, which helps with stimulation. And sometimes with remotes, we can, for people with hand limitations, we can devise the remote on a platform or a stand so that somebody just has to kind of hit it with a pencil or hit it with some part of their hand if they're able to do that, so that the actual self-stimulation is not as much of a barrier. I also think that, ergonomic vibrators, meaning vibrators that, fit easily into someone's hand, and something that's easy to control, And they actually have a section on their website on disability, and their products have been really helpful to people in the community, because things that might be used to tie somebody up or restrain somebody also hold people in place. And so some of those devices can actually be used to assist people with disabilities with holding on to something and being able to use devices in a more independent way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the last 5 years, I haven't been truly sexually active since my accident, mostly because I've just been focused on where I want to go in show business and just, focus on that and stuff, but like I said, I masturbate a lot, and just before I left my hometown, though, I did get to have some intimacy with a friend of mine. It was just a foreplay type of situation. That was it and stuff. But after quarantine ends, I'm going to try to make it a priority to be sexually active again, because I do miss it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And sometimes, there are times in life that we all have dark cloud times of sex life.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're not feeling well, or you have an accident, or somebody, if somebody's in pain, I mean, physical pain is a huge deterrent to desire. So, I mean, I think that's pretty much, that's part of the natural lifespan that you ask people, is sex important to you? If it is important to you, and you haven't had access to it, doesn't mean that you can't go back to it. Usually people find their way back after they are getting through whatever difficult time that they might be having.
Mm-hmm. So here comes the fun part of the show, Dr. Linda. There's a game that I like to engage my guests in. It's silly slumber party questions. And how this works is, I ask you the question, you answer it, and then you ask me the exact same question, and I answer it.
Okay, and is an option to decline?
You're like the second person who's ever asked me, on all the hundreds of times I've played this game. Just about everything is borderline inappropriate, but it's not really.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, because I am a licensed psychologist, I will do my best.
Okay, it's just silliness. That's all it is.
Let's be silly then.
Okay, Doctor, are you ticklish?
I am ticklish. Are you ticklish?
I am baby ticklish. Yes. What is your favorite part of the body?
My favorite part of the body is somebody's eyes. What is your favorite part of the body?
That's a popular one. Mine is the belly button.
Oh, innie or outie? That's an add-on question.
Either one. I'm just obsessed with them. I'm part of a Facebook group dedicated to them.
All right.
What color are your toenails painted?
They are painted pink. What color are your toenails painted?
They're not painted right now because I got through the winter months. Now I'm trying to figure out what my next color will be. The last time it was purple with sparkles.
Okay.
What would you say is your best personality trait?
My best personality trait is being non-judgmental.
I agree.
What is yours?
My sense of empathy and my no filter.
Okay.
And then my favorite question, is there a stinky smell that just makes you gag?
Yeah. I would say yes, and that is trash, which is why I make my kids throw it out every single day. Is there a smell that makes you gag?
Either farts or feet.
Okay.
I can imagine having kids, that probably doesn't affect you.
Especially boys, yeah.
Yes. See, those questions weren't too bad, huh?
No, No, that was fun.
Okay. So where is your practice located?
So I am located in Southern California,
Mm-hmm.
in the Los Angeles County area.
Are you
Well, my organization is Inclusivity Clinical Consulting Services, and so we do mental health services for individuals and for couples, and I also do consulting with healthcare companies on issues around diversity and disability, as well as sexuality and disability.
Mm-hmm. Are you born and raised in Los Angeles?
I was born in Los Angeles and raised here, and I left the area for 10 years to do schooling and training, and then I came back.
Oh, well, where'd you train at?
I went to school at Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia, and then I came back to Northern California at the Palo Alto VA, and I did my internship in Palo Alto and my postdoctoral training in Palo Alto.
Oh, I'm born and raised in San Mateo.
Is that right? I lived in San Mateo.
Yeah.
Street.
Yep, I missed the way San Mateo used to be. It's not the same anymore. Yeah,
right?
Ever since the tech boom happened, yeah. It used to be a small town where everybody knew each other, and now it's just everyone's a stranger and everyone's trying to make money.
Yeah.
It's sad. So has quarantine affected your business at all?
Well, I think no, not really. It has for consulting. It's just a transfer to everything online. So there's less in-person presentations, and there's less in-person services for clients. But, telehealth has always been a big plus for people who have transportation barriers or difficulties with accessing buildings or getting out, or, I've just switched everything to online services. So, there's something to say about seeing someone in person and having that personal contact, which is really important. But I think that, in lieu of nothing at all, that this is something that we can do. And I think it's important to keep in mind that people with disabilities have been isolated for a while. Right? They know how to do this. For people who don't feel well or people with chronic pain, there are times when they don't go out of the house for a month or two. And so I find it interesting that, if you're on the newscasters, let's interview astronauts and see how they cope with quarantine. Like, let's interview people with disabilities and chronic health issues or chronic pain, because they've done this for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think there's something to say there about the disability community and how people manage during this time. And I think the other part that's unique is that what's all around the community is hearing how people with chronic health issues are more susceptible. So people keep feeling like you're hearing on the news every day, like you're the one that's going to, you're going to be affected more than everyone else. And that may or may not be true. We don't know everything for sure. This is a new issue. It's a new virus. It's a new issue. And so we don't really know. But I think there's an overwhelming sense of the vulnerability of people with chronic health issues.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. I'll tell you, Dr. Linda, you are an amazing inspiration, and you're doing God's work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely. It's very difficult to get anyone to come on here to talk about sex, especially sex doctors. I've been trying to get Tammy Nelson on here forever. I love her work.
Yeah, she's outstanding. She is outstanding.
Yeah, but I'm very glad that I got to talk to you today because you're just amazing.
Thank you so much.
So stay safe, have amazing orgasms, and have a great day.
Thank you so much. You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Dr. Linda Mona. Ain't she a sweetheart? Oh, my God. What an amazing inspiration of a lady she is. Just going out there, riding her cart away and helping people just like her. That's just... You can't get any better than that. If you like this video, everyone, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Add me as a friend on Facebook. Join my Tommy Kovac comedian page on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram and all that fun stuff. Well, that's all the time we have this week on Splat from the Past. Until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying, there's no shame in living in the past, because the present sucks. Later, dudes.